At L&M Fine Jewelry, we hand select our diamonds to give you the very best prices possible. Monty knows a great deal when he finds one. Find your great deal at L&M Fine Jewelry.
Your diamond destination.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Samuel Akem here, and I'm back with another one. I appreciate you guys so much for tapping in once again. Week 2 of the college football season is officially over. The Big Sky had a big weekend. Some of the teams in the Big Sky actually took their first loss of the season. Montana, Eastern Washington. Montana State continues to roll. Idaho continues to look like one of the top teams in the Big Sky Conference, no matter who is under center. We're going to be talking about all of it. Make sure you guys hit the like button right now. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel immediately. Make sure you guys leave me a comment down below of what we covered in this video, and we will get straight into it. Okay. First things first, Montana loses a heartbreaker to North Dakota. They started the game off very hot, went up to a 24-7 lead in the first half. They seemed like they were firing on all cylinders. And then next thing you know, in the second half, North Dakota stopped playing around with them. They started to play some ball control football. They started to control the clock, the time of possession. If you look at some of the possessions they had, 15 plays. 16 plays, 15 plays, 7 minutes, 8 minutes. At one point in the second half, North Dakota had back-to-back drives of 7 minutes and 8 minutes, and one was 15 plays, the other was 16 plays. Both, I think, ended in points, and that's like a whole quarter off the clock where Montana's offense is not on the field. Due to that, Montana was not able to get their offense going. They struggled mightily in the second half. They had three and outs in the second half to where their offense got on the field and got off. Before the last drive of the game, actually, Montana had 3 straight 3 and outs. 3 straight 3 and outs. Montana only ran 17 plays in the second half. They didn't get their first down, I believe, until Kali Ayat scrambled on a QB draw on a 4th and 1. Before then, they were about to get another 3 and out. They ended up getting a couple more plays, but Montana struggled mightily. They could not get anything going. It was a tough outing for Montana. North Dakota, on the other hand, played a great game. They executed on all cylinders. Montana, when you look at this Montana squad, they're struggling tackling. That is the number one thing you have to point out. Montana is having a very, very hard time bringing the ball carrier down. They're struggling tackling. You look back at the film. Please go watch my breakdown of that game. I talk a lot about their tackling struggles in that breakdown. You get to see a lot of the tackling struggles in the breakdown. I mean, just missed tackles left and right, over pursuit left and right. And it's something that, we definitely did not see from this Montana squad last year. They were a great tackling squad. And that's something I mention a lot. I mention it all the time. The difference between a good football team, a good defensive football team, and a mediocre to bad defensive football team is tackling. And, Montana only gave up 27 points, which is a lot. Last year they averaged, I think they gave up around 16, 17 points in outing. So, they're already above that average this year. Last week against Missouri State, they gave up 24 against Missouri State. And this week they gave up 27 against North Dakota. So, Montana's defense is really having a hard time getting off the field. And so tackling is the number one thing you point to when you look at this defense that they're really struggling on. But the second thing you look at is third downs, man. Like, this defense is having a very hard time getting off the field on third down. There were multiple occasions in that second half against North Dakota to where Montana could have got off the field on third down and, a slant in man coverage, they convert. The quarterback scrambles and gets the first down. The running back on a 3rd and 8, they run it to Z-Barth and he gets 9 on 3rd and 8. Once again, nobody able to bring him down. It's just very frustrating from a Montana standpoint because, you see this team, you see some of the talent they have, you see some of the talent that they brought in, and you see the potential. Obviously, they haven't had Junior Bergen. Obviously, they haven't had Cole Grossman. Another thing I'm going to point out about this team, last week, I was on the side of thinking that you should play Fife. If you're going to play one of them, I thought that I was leaning towards Fife just based off of what I saw, some of the intricacies that I saw within the offense between Ayat and Fife. I look back at that game and, I think you need to stick with Fife. I think Fife needs to be the 100% start, or not Fife, excuse me. Ayat needs to be the 100% starter. I think Ayat needs to play the full game. Let him make his mistakes, but let him play through it. Don't take him out. Don't let him, not that he was, I mean, they had a good mojo. Not that they took him out in the midst of that mojo, but putting Fife in just kind of, I don't know, it just throws things off. Just leave him in. Let him play through his bad. Let him play through the good. Let him stay in the game, man. Like leave Ayat in the game. I 100% believe that Ayat should play the whole game. Now, there was a missed deep ball that you got to get up and down a little bit earlier. But when you look at the grand scheme of that game, I think Fife played a fairly good game. The offensive line is having a really, really hard time protecting the quarterback, right now. I do think North Dakota was bringing some blitzes that Montana was unable to pick up. I don't know how far along Ayat is in terms of being able to check protection, knowing where to check the protection at, knowing where he's hot at, knowing where the blitz is going to be coming from. I don't know how far he advanced he is on that standpoint. I don't know what the coaches are coaching him up on that standpoint, so I can't so much speak on why the blitzes are getting there, because it might not be the offensive line. It might just be the fact that he doesn't know how to recognize it and check into the right protection and get his offensive line dialed in the right place. But a lot of times, there's plays that you look at where it has nothing to do with like Ayat checking the protection. You look at guys getting beat. Brandon Casey, who's a first-team all-conference tackle, getting beat. Their guards getting beat. Their center getting beat. Their left guard getting, there's multiple plays where they just get out-leveraged on rushes where they're not necessarily bringing a blitz, and Ayat's under pressure for no other reason than, your lineman just getting beat. These are things that need to be fixed, man, and fixed ASAP. You got Morehead State this week. I don't think Morehead State is going to be up to the level of Missouri State or North Dakota, but next week when you play or the week after that when you play Western Carolina. Now, I don't know how good Western Carolina is either, because I watched that team this week. I watched that team play this week, and I was not super impressed, man. I don't know. The Cole Gonzalez was not playing the best game. They lost against Campbell. It was 24-16, the final score. They didn't look like the strongest team, and I don't know what the reason for that was, but I do know Montana needs to get their issues figured out ASAP. You got to be able to tackle better, and I don't know. To me, tackling comes down to an effort thing. Like, are you giving effort? Are you running to the ball? Are you gap sound? Are you wrapping up? Like, a lot of arm tackles, guys not pursuing fully, guys not giving 100% effort. Like, it's just things that you can't coach. Effort, you cannot be coached. You got to run to the ball. I feel like last year when you watch this Montana defense, there's 5 to 6 to 7 guys to the ball at one point. This year, it's like one-on-one tackles that are being missed, which you got to make those tackles. But if you swarm to the ball, your brothers are able to help you. Guys over pursue, then a guy makes a cut. It's just, I don't know. I'm struggling to really understand this team right now. A lot of people point to the offensive struggles and point to Coach Pease. And, watching some of those drives back in the second half, there might have been some misreads. Like, I know a lot of times when you got younger quarterbacks, a lot of times in college, you're not doing full field reads. You tell them to pick a side. And at times it seemed like Ayat would pick the wrong side in terms of a read. Like, he picked the left side, and that the tight end's covered when you got an open receiver on a curl route. Like, I don't know. I do know, but it's tough. It's tough. This team is really struggling. This team is really reeling right now. I think the fans are who cares about the fans? I'm talking to the fans right now, but the team doesn't care about what the fans think. But in terms of the fans, the sky is falling right now. It's do or die for the fan standpoint. But when you look back at that team last year, that team lost to a NAU squad that they probably shouldn't have lost to. They did not play their best in the altitude in northern Arizona and Flagstaff, and they ended up going to the national championship. Now, this year is a bit different, I will say, because a lot of people didn't expect that team to go to the national championship, and that was just kind of like a nice added prize on top of whatever that season was for the fans. This season, I think a lot of people do expect this Montana squad to make a deep run to the playoffs, and so far up to this point, they haven't looked like a team who could compete even in the Big Sky. I think you look at Idaho. Idaho's a better team than Montana right now. Montana State is definitely a better team than Montana right now. Eastern Washington, I'm not so much sure. But, from the standpoint of just in conference, you look at UC Davis. UC Davis might be a better outfit than Montana right now. We haven't seen Sac State against any FCS competition, so it's tough to judge them. But even Weber State put it on Portland State. They were really good on the ground. Montana's having trouble right now stopping teams in the run game. They're just having trouble tackling. But Montana's is like the fourth or fifth best team in the Big Sky Conference right now. I think definitively you can say they're like fourth or fifth best in the Big Sky Conference. And it's troubling. It's troubling when you look at it. So you guys let me know in the comments what you think about that Montana game. It was like a tale of two halves, man. First half, they look great. Their offense is moving beautifully. All the weapons are touching the. Xavier Harris is touching the ball. Aaron Fonts is touching the ball. Eli Gilman has a 60-yard touchdown run. Ayat is throwing it all over the place, hitting his receivers. I mean, it just seems like things were rolling. The run game, I don't know how much they were trying to get it involved in the run game, but, it seemed like the run game was doing decently well. You get the 60-yard run from Eli, which I think can jade the run game. But outside of that, I don't think their run game was doing very strong. I don't think it was doing very strong. Either way, you guys leave me a comment and tell me what you think about that Montana game. They will face Morehead State this week. On Saturday, they're back in Waugriz. They're in Waugriz for the next 2 weeks with their last two non-conference games. They got Morehead State this week. You guys leave me a comment what you think, and I will move on. Okay, another game that I mentioned that I was going to be paying attention to in terms of what to think about this Eastern Washington squad, because I saw them against Monmouth. First off, Eastern Washington loses an OT thriller against Drake, 35-32. Go watch that game back. It was a really good game. Eastern Washington struggled in the past game. I mean, they didn't really necessarily struggle. I think Kakoa Visperis played a pretty good game, but when you look at the overall of it, they struggled. They did pretty good on the ground game. They ran the ball pretty successfully. They finished with 206 rushing yards, so they kind of spread it around from that standpoint. Kakoa Visperis was 21 of 26, 177 passing yards, but he had no passing touchdowns. His receivers did not really ball out. His receivers kind of struggled in this game this week, but they were still in it. They were still in it with a chance to win it. I think the difference in the game with Eastern Washington and Drake was the turnover by Drake. The turnover by Eastern Washington. Eastern Washington had a turnover. I can't remember what point in the game it was at, but they lost a fumble, and I think that really, when you look back at this game, that ends up being the difference. Now, defense has been the one thing that I've pointed to with this Eastern Washington squad that's going to be the difference maker for them. Defense. And you look at this defense, and they gave up how many? 460 yards of offense for Drake. Drake had 460 total yards of offense. Eastern Washington gave up 393 passing yards, man. Like, you cannot win like that. You cannot win like that. Absolutely, you cannot win like that. So that's a tough loss for Eastern Washington to take. Their defensive struggles, it's just imminent, man. Like, they can't get teams off the field. They can't stop the pass. I think even if you look at that Monmouth game last week, you look in that second half, and a lot of what Monmouth was getting was in the air. So from that standpoint, it's a little disappointing that, this is what Eastern Washington is dealt with. I think that Drake squad is a pretty good squad. They had the Pioneer League Defensive Player of the Year on their team. Their quarterback was a really good player. He threw it all over the place. They got some good receivers. They had two 100-yard receivers. One had 4 for 101 and a touchdown, averaged 25 yards of reception. And then they had another that had 5 for 101. Their quarterback was 28 of 48, 380 yards and 2 touchdowns. Threw it all over the place. But then you look at the run game. Drake had 67 yards on the ground, which you would think you see that and think, okay, like, we should be good. We're able to stop the run, but like, you're stopping them on the ground, but you have an inability to stop them in the air, which is where teams are going to kill you the most. I mean, 2 100-yard receivers, another 83-yard receiver. It's just devastating. The 200-yard receivers averaged more than 20 yards a catch for those 200-yard receivers. So really rough. Their leading rusher had 25 yards. So it's like, what are we doing, Eastern? What are we doing? We got to get it figured out. We got to get the defense figured out. We got to get off the field. We have to get off the field. That is the number one thing. You have to get off the field. I mean, man. And then you get to OT. You end up with a field goal. So then you just got to get a stop. And their quarterback made a miraculous play. The receiver made a miraculous reception. So from that standpoint, it's like, they kind of got you. But man. I'm looking at this Eastern team, and now you think of the grand scheme of the Big Sky Conference, and looking at the rest of Eastern's schedule, they have Sela this week. Might be another close game for them. Then they have Nevada. who's 1-2. Eastern's 1-1. So, what do we expect from them? Then they start conference play with Montana on the red turf. Think that could be a potentially decent game, but if their defense is the way it is against Montana, I see Montana with the weapons that they have kind of carving that defense up. Then they go to Sacramento. Then they go to Sacramento. Then they have Eastern at home, and then they have Idaho. I mean, Eastern's schedule, now that you're looking at it, now that the Big Sky has kind of shaped up, they got Montana, Sacramento State, UC Davis, Idaho, and then Montana State. They have a gauntlet. Eastern Washington has an absolute gauntlet. So after losing to Drake, it's not looking great for Eastern. It's not looking great for Eastern. I don't know. I've been kind of high on Eastern. I've been trying to, hang in there with them and I think highly of them, but I don't know what to think after that game. I really don't know what to think. We will see. We will see what we get from Eastern following that Drake game. You guys let me know in the comments what you thought about that Eastern Washington game versus Drake. Obviously lost in overtime. Obviously defense is the question mark for them. But another thing that I had in my notes. Eastern Washington had 10 penalties for 115 yards. You can't win like that. Last week, the Montana-Missouri State game, Missouri State had 13 penalties for like 100 and something yards as well, and that's just not winning football. You got to play cleaner. You have to play cleaner. That's just a fact. You got to play cleaner. You guys let me know in the comments what you guys thought about that Eastern Drake game, and I will move on. Okay, Montana State dominates Maine 41-24. I think Montana really took their foot off the gas because if you look at that score early on in the game, if you look at that game in the first half, it looks much differently than it did in the second half. But Montana rolled. They rushed for 344 yards. Scottre Humphrey had 4 carries, 110 yards, 2 touchdowns. He averaged 27 yards a carry. I think he actually had like a 70-yard touchdown during this game. But Montana State absolutely rolled against Maine. It was a slaughter. Scottre Humphrey had a 79-yard touchdown run. So, and then you got Jared White, who had 15 rushes, 99 yards. You had Tommy Millott, who had 5 for 66 yards, 5 carries for 68 yards. Adam Jones had 4 for 63 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, they just dominated it from every standpoint, from absolutely every standpoint. A 40-yard long run for Adam Jones, a 20-yard run for Tommy Millott, a 27-yard run for Jared White, and a 79-yard run for Scottre Humphrey. I think Scottre Humphrey looks like the best running back in the Big Sky Conference right now. You guys can let me know who looks better, but so far through 3 weeks, I think Scottre Humphrey has looked the best out of all the running backs that we have in the Big Sky Conference. And I'm willing to argue with anybody. I think Montana State currently looks poised to run the table in the Big Sky Conference. I don't see anybody really being able to beat them right now based off what I've seen. I think, let me look at Montana State's schedule. So the only team that I think could really give Montana State a run for their money, and the reason I think this is because of their D-line, is Idaho. I think that Idaho date in Montana State on October 12th is going to be a really, really good game. We'll see what Idaho's schedule is up to that point, but I really like what I've seen from Idaho's defense. We've seen 2 weeks of Idaho playing FBS competition, and they've played them very strong. They beat Wyoming this week 17-14, in part because of their defense. But obviously Montana State's a really good rushing team, really good offensive team, really good on the ground. Idaho's been really good defensively, and we will see. But that's going to be a really good game. But so far, Montana State is my number 1 team in the Big Sky Conference right now. They've looked absolutely amazing. They beat New Mexico. They just beat Maine this week, and then last week they beat Utah Tech. They've looked pretty good. I think the one thing I think that could get Montana State is when they see a team that's better offensively. They faced New Mexico. New Mexico got helped with 2 defensive touchdowns. So from that standpoint, I don't know what their offense was like. They play Utah Tech, who's not great offensively. They played Maine, who wasn't great offensively. And maybe Montana State's defense is just really elite. Maybe they are, but I don't think very highly of the competition. I remember saying this in the offseason. I remember iterating this in the offseason. So any of you Bobcat fans out there, please don't be angry at me. I said that I thought Montana State's non-conference schedule was pretty weak. I said that I think they should be 3-1 at worst 3-1 going into conference play. It looks like they're gonna be 4-0 going into conference play. They have Mercyhurst this week. I don't think very highly of Mercyhurst. They were, I think, a D2 team last year. They just moved up to the FCS, and It's unfortunate for Montana State because they lost one of their non-conference games, so they added Mercyhurst later in the offseason. But I said this all offseason. I didn't think very highly of Montana State's non-conference schedule. The one thing that looks strong for Montana State is the fact that they beat that New Mexico squad. So from that standpoint, we will see. We still need to see them against some FCS competition. We won't really see Montana State. I don't think Montana State's really going to get tested in their conference schedule. They started with Idaho State, who's looked decent. Then they have Northern Colorado. Then they have Idaho. That's going to be the big date that I think a lot of people should be paying attention to. Then they have Portland State, who I think they will beat. Then they have Eastern Washington, who I also think they will beat. Then they have Sac State, could be a good game. They have UC Davis, should be a good game. And then they have Montana, obviously, to finish the season. So, Montana State, I think, is looking like the Big Sky favorite for me. 3 weeks into the season for them, 2 weeks into after 3 games, after Montana State having played 3 games, they look like the Big Sky favorite to me. They look like the best team in the Big Sky. Idaho looks like the best defense in the Big Sky. But if I'm just talking about in totality, the best team in the Big Sky currently is Montana State. They've showed that. They're 3-0, and they've really ran through the last two teams that they've had. And the comeback that they made against New Mexico was very, very impressive. So Montana State looks great. They're running the ball successfully like they always do. Scott Trey Humphrey looks like the best running back in the conference to me. You guys let me know what you think about these comments. You guys let me know what you think about that in the comments, and I will move on. Okay, my last Big Sky reaction that I'm going to make this week is the Idaho versus Wyoming reaction. Idaho played an amazing game against Wyoming. Defensively, they balled out. I just need to say it right now. Keyshawn James, newbie, has been the best defensive player in the Big Sky, and it ain't close for me. It's not close. Somebody else show me somebody who's had a better start to their season. But so far, this man has 5 sacks and 5 tackles for loss in 2 weeks against FBS competition. Mind you, one of those teams was an FBS, at the time, top 5, AP top 5 team. Now they're top 10, and after what they did against Boise State, I don't know if they'll be top 10. But that team I'm referencing is Oregon. Keyshawn James, newbie, had 2 sacks against Oregon. He had 3 sacks against Wyoming. I honestly thought he had a half in there that, ESPN, the stats I'm getting are per ESPN. So, maybe the SID people at Idaho had his stats a little different, had his numbers a little different. But so far, he's got at least 5 sacks on the season, which is amazing, in 2 games against FBS competition. I know that's going to bode very, very well for him in terms of NFL scouts. That's what they want to see. They want to see you ball out against higher level competition. They want to see what you're going to do when you play against NFL caliber competition, which I'm sure Oregon has some NFL caliber guys on their team, and I don't know about Wyoming, but 2 FBS teams, 1 Mountain West team, 1 Big Ten team. Keyshawn James, newbie, has balled out. On the other hand of things, outside of Keyshawn James, newbie, that Idaho defense is looking elite, man. Looking elite. Tackling at a high level, covering at a high level, not giving up a ton of points no matter who they're playing against. I mean, it's crazy to think about that too, because you look at that Oregon game, and Oregon seems like they carved them up, but Dylan Gabriel threw the ball about 50 times in that game, and a lot of those were short passes behind the line of scrimmage to where they're not getting a ton of yardage out of it. But his percentages looked high. I think he completed like 80% of his passes. He had like 380 passing yards. I think he had 2 passing touchdowns, but it's those stats are empty calories. Those stats were empty calories because at the end of the day, they only won by 10, and it was a very close game. Idaho had a chance. Sorry if you keep hearing my voice squeak. It's very smoky in Montana right now. If I went outside and showed you guys what it looks like outside, it's super smoky. There's a couple of fires burning in the Bitterroot right now. You guys don't know where the Bitterroot is. If you're from Montana, you know where the Bitterroot is at. But there's some fires burning right now, so it's affecting my voice amazingly. One other thing I wanted to point out about this Idaho squad. Coach Jason Eck is great at developing quarterbacks. I don't know if they have a quarterback coach. I don't know if that's Coach Eck who does that at Idaho, but it's Coach Eck's coaching staff. It's Coach Eck's team. So the way they have developed these quarterbacks has been great. Giovanni McCoy was a great quarterback. Jack Lane has looked great so far since we've seen him. He's obviously hurt now. Jack Wagner, who was a 3-star recruit, has looked great so far. He played a great game yesterday before going out. Hopefully he's able to still play, because if not, if we're looking at a 3rd string quarterback for Idaho, I mean, man, how much worse can it get for this Idaho squad? They've looked great through 2 weeks. Put Oregon to the wire, put Oregon to the test, and then this week we're in a very, very close victory against Wyoming. It's been a great game. Jack Wagner was 12 of 21, 101 yards and 1 touchdown, no interceptions. They ran the ball decently well. I mean, offensively, to be fair, Idaho has not looked amazing offensively. I think their quarterbacks have looked good. Their quarterbacks have protected the ball. Their quarterbacks haven't really put the ball in harm's way. But in terms of, like offensive firepower, they haven't looked the strongest. They don't have a Hayden Hatton. They don't have a Jermaine Jackson. They don't have a Giovanni McCoy. Obviously, these quarterbacks are a little different than Giovanni McCoy. I think Jack Lane can run the ball similar to how Giovanni McCoy, but Giovanni McCoy to me wasn't a guy always looking to run the ball. He was scrambling to find receivers down the field, but he could scramble if he needed to. Offensively, I don't think Idaho has looked the strongest. You look at this Wyoming game, they had 225 total yards of offense, 101 passing, 124 on the ground, but they did enough to win the game. So from that standpoint, they were 1-13 on third down, so not great from that standpoint. They were 2-4 on fourth down, but defensively, they held Wyoming to 6 of 16 on third down, 1 of 2 on fourth down. They held them to 270 yards of total offense, 126 in the air, 144 on the ground. So essentially, really, if you look at the box score, if you were somebody who just looked at the box score and didn't watch the Idaho versus Wyoming game, you would probably think Wyoming should have won. But defensively, they had some timely stops. Those sacks by Keyshawn James Newby, the way they're able to get to the quarterback, their defensive line has been playing at a very high level. I think this Idaho team is good. I think they need to get some things figured out offensively, but defensively, I would say they're probably the best defensive team in the conference right now, based off of what I have seen. It's still very early on in the season, so it's hard to really make some grand thoughts about what could happen and what's going to happen the rest of the season. But, Montana State, Idaho are looking like two of the better teams in the conference so far. It's still too early. The jury's still out on some of these teams, but, Idaho looks good. What do you guys think about that? Leave me a comment down below, and I will move.
Join Town Pump's Pump It Up Rewards Plus program and never pay full price for fuel again.
Save 5 cents on every gallon every day at any Town Pump across Montana.
Plus, earn and redeem points on your favorite in-store items to get free stuff with our clubs.
Stop in and pick up a rewards card. Download the Pump It Up Rewards Plus app today.
Or visit townpump.com/rewards to register and start saving.
Right down the road. Pump it up. Oh, yeah.
Okay. If you guys know Brian Marceau, who's he has a podcast, I think it's called Tubs in the Club, for Idaho. I have been submitting a weekly poll through him that I guess is shown. The poll that they show is shown on their show weekly, which they record on Sundays. I entered my poll last week, and I wanted to talk about who I put and what the rankings were for my poll. Montana fans might be mad at me for this, but I don't care. I don't think Montana fans would be mad at me. I think they would agree with me. I think I honestly was generous with where I put Montana in this poll. But at 1, I put Montana State. At 2, I put Idaho. At 3, I put UC Davis. At 4, I put Montana. The reason I put Montana at 4 is because they played a North Dakota squad. It was a very close game. Obviously they're 1-1. They're not 0-2. I think it's still hard to tell with some of these teams, like a Sac State, who's only played FBS competition. It's hard to tell. NAU played a Lincoln squad, who's not even an FCS team. They beat up on them. But so 4, Montana. 5 is NAU. At 6, I have Sac State. At 7, I have Weber State. At 8, I have Eastern Washington. At 9, I put Idaho State. At 10, I put Northern Colorado. At 11, I put Portland State. And at 12, I put Cal Poly. Now, let me iterate something. This list is fluid. If you watch Stephen A. Smith, you watch his A-list, it's very similar to that. This list is very fluid. It will change from week to week, but based off what I've seen so far, I think these are the rankings. Now, could there be some I think the top three are rock solid for me right now. Montana State at 1, Idaho at 2, and UC Davis at 3. I think that's where it has to be. Montana State is the definitive number 1 in the conference right now. They are undefeated, and they beat everybody you've put in front of them. And you know, they, besides that first half of that New Mexico game, they've looked like the best team in the conference. They haven't really faltered. You know, Montana has looked good at points. UC Davis has looked good at points. Idaho offensively is still trying to get some things figured out, but defensively, they've looked really strong defensively. Obviously, hopefully, Jack Wagner's not out for an extended period of time, because I think that could change some things, but I don't want to be like the College Football Playoff Committee either and rank a team based off of who's playing for them. I want to rank them based off of what I have seen on the field, what they have produced on the field when we've seen them. And what Idaho has done has played an Oregon squad that's supposed to be good this year, very close. And, you know, they played Wyoming, an FBS opponent, a Mountain West squad, very close, and beat them. So those are my rankings. Montana State, Idaho, UC Davis, Montana, NAU. The reason I say NAU is although they did lose to Arizona, I think they looked very strong against Arizona. This is an Arizona squad that we just saw put up their quarterback and receiver. The receiver just had 300 yards of receiving. And let me pull up these stats from this Northern Arizona game right now, because, you know, their defense must have played a magnificent game, because Tetero McMillan, I think, had under 100 receiving yards. Tetero McMillan finished with 11 receiving yards. Now, was he hurt? I don't know. I obviously didn't watch that game, but their quarterback was 18 for 26, 173 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. I mean, Northern Arizona played an amazing game. And who is at the top of this list? Alex McLaughlin, another star, another all-conference player from last year. 11 total tackles, 6 solo, 1 sack, 1 TFL. I mean, Alex McLaughlin is one of the better defenders in the Big Sky Conference for sure. One of the better defenders in the Big Sky Conference for sure. But man, they played a great game. Northern Arizona played a great game. Offensively, they weren't able to get things going, but defensively, they were flying around. I mean, dang, their offensive stats are pedestrian. But defensively, they played a great game. They played a really, really good game defensively. And I'm excited to see what they're able to do. So Northern Arizona at 5, Sac State at 6, Weber State at 7. I think, honestly, I could have switched Weber State and Sac State. I honestly could have put Weber State at 6 and put Sac State at 7. I honestly could have put Weber State at 5 if I'm being real. So obviously, you know, this list is fluid. This list is not going to be secured every week, but I am going to be trying to submit a poll every week so that, you know, I can get an idea of where I think these Big Sky teams should be ranked. You guys let me know what you think about my Big Sky rankings, and I will move on. Okay. I want to talk about my top Big Sky performances of week 2. First, we got Keyshawn James Newby of Idaho, who now has made my top Big Sky performances for the first 2 weeks. Last week he made it when he had a killer game against Oregon, and this week he's made it too. 4 total tackles, 3 solo, 3 sacks, 3 tackles for loss. Now, I think sacks count for tackles for loss as well, so I probably could have just said sacks, but it makes it look better when you say sacks and tackles for loss. But he had an amazing game. This man has been in the corner, getting around the edge, dominating on the defensive line at that defensive end position. He is a monster, wrecking shop right now. You know, I think early on in the season, it's early to tell, but he could be in the running for Big Sky Defensive Player of the Year, potentially. One thing I've always wondered is when they do Big Sky Defensive Player of the Year, are they only taking into account what you did against conference and conference competition, or are they taking into account your whole body of work? Obviously, it's voted on by the coaches, so we'd have to ask them. We'd have to ask some of the Big Sky Conference officials. But Keyshawn James Newby has been balling. He's been absolutely balling. Next on my list is Scott Trey Humphrey of Montana State. 4 carries, 110 yards, 2 touchdowns, average of 27.5 yards a carry. Are you kidding me? Obviously, he had an 80-yard run, 79-yard run that really inflated those stats, but only 4 carries, 110 yards. I mean, this dude's been balling. This dude's been balling this year. I think Scott Humphrey looks like the best running back in the conference so far to me. I haven't seen anybody else that's looked better than him. He was somebody who I was very high on last year. When I saw him, I was very impressed with what he was able to do. He can catch out of the backfield. I don't think they throw it to him out of the backfield a ton, but running out of the backfield, running between tackles in that zone scheme that they run, he does it at a high level. He does it at a high level. He runs behind his shoulder pads. Yeah, he's a great running back. Great running back. Next on my list is Damon Bankston of Weber State. 15 carries, 133 yards, 2 touchdowns. He averaged 8.9 yards a carry. They absolutely dominated Portland State 43-16. I think Weber State might be poised for another big time season this year. Obviously, I don't know what the jury's still out on a lot of these teams because if we have seen them against FCS competition, it's only been one game. I think we need a bigger body of work to make a better judgment on some of these teams. But Weber State against Big Sky competition absolutely dominated them in a big way, in a big way. So Weber State, Damon Bankston, 133 yards, 2 touchdowns, average of 9 yards a carry. That's a really good outing. Really good outing. He's another player who had a top performance. Another top Big Sky performance of week 2 was Lan Larison of UC Davis. He had 28 carries, 123 yards on an average of 4.4 yards a carry, but he also had 3 receptions, for 50 yards and an average of 16.7 yards a reception. That's 183 total yards of offense. He did not get in the zone, which is kind of disappointing, but dude balled out. Dude had an absolute game against Texas A&M Commerce. Another top performer. His quarterback, though, also had another big game. Another one of my top Big Sky performers is Miles Hastings of UC Davis. He threw for 26 for 39, 320 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. So those 2 UC Davis guys had a really big game. They put up 36 points this week. I don't know how good Texas A&M Commerce is. They played San Diego State, lost by 30. Obviously, they lost by 14, 36-22 to UC Davis. So I don't know what to think about them right now. But, they have Southern Utah next week, who's in the UAC. So we will see what UC Davis is able to do. But Miles Hastings, Lan Larison, 2 of my top performers from week 2. Next on this list is Ian Duarte of Idaho State. Idaho State just beat Western Oregon. As they should have. They beat him by 40. But Ian Duarte had a really good game. He had 9 receptions, 123 yards, 2 touchdowns on an average of 13.7 yards per reception. Really, really good game for Ian Duarte. Great job for him. Really, really good job for Ian Duarte of Idaho State. Obviously, the jury's still out on them as well. We will see what they're able to do. They play North Dakota this week. That is a game that I will be paying attention to. That is a game that I want to see. That is definitely a game I want to see this week. Obviously, Montana just lost to North Dakota. I want to know, I think it'll give us a good idea of what Idaho State is this year, but also it'll give us a better idea of what North Dakota is. If North Dakota rolls them, then they're the real deal, and, Montana just lost to a better team. If they lose to Idaho State, what does that say about Idaho State? What does that say about Montana? What does that say about North Dakota? It's going to give us a lot of answers that I don't think we have right now. I think the biggest thing you can see right now is that Montana struggles tackling. Montana struggles defensively right now. They're struggling getting off the field on 3rd down, and they're struggling tackling. Idaho State, North Dakota, going to be a really good outing. I'm talking about my top performers. Ian Duarte is one of them. He had a great game against Western Oregon. I would love to see him do it against some FCS competition, but in terms of what he was able to do against Western Oregon, it looks very good, brother. I'm very impressed with what you were able to do. Keep up the good work, man. Keep up the good work. Next on my list is Mr. Gibson, Jared Gibson from Sac State. They lost this week to Fresno State. They lost by 16. I think the game was fairly close throughout, but they ended up not coming through with it. Seems like they went with Carson Conklin for most of the game, the younger quarterback, younger than Caden Bennett. They threw the ball 50 times. Carson Conklin threw the ball more, 20 for 37, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Caden Bennett was 5 for 13, 135 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. But Jarrett Gibson, my goodness, 5 receptions, 138 yards, 1 touchdown, an average of 27.6 yards a catch. Obviously heavily weighted by a 78-yard reception. Man, Jared Gibson was one of the top receivers returning this year in terms of statistically. I think he was probably like 4th or 5th statistically returning in the conference. They lost some weapons last year. They lost their tight end, I always want to call him Terrace Marshall. Marshall Martin, and then they lost a receiver, Carlos Hill. So some production that needs to be replaced last year. I think Carlos Hill was their leading receiver last year. Obviously, Marshall Martin brings a lot to the table, but Jarrett Gibson seems to be picking up the slack from where it was lost last year, but he's one of my top performers. I didn't see this guy prior to, but I was just talking about him in the last segment, and I want to bring him up. My last and final top performer from week 2 is Northern Arizona's Alex McLaughlin. Freshman All-American last year, sophomore this year, looking to repeat what he did last year, this year. I think he was one of their leading, if not their leading tackler for NAU last year. What did he do this week? 11 tackles, 6 solo, 1 sack, 1 TFL, no pass defenses, no interceptions or anything like that. But, man, absolutely flies around. He plays that safety position at a very, very high level. He's a great player, young guy. Hopefully he stays in the Big Sky because, with guys like this who ball out, he's somebody who I could potentially see moving up. Maybe one of those Arizona schools come try to grab him, Arizona or Arizona State. They're going to be watching the same film that everybody else in the Big Sky is watching, and he was an All-American for a reason. He's a really, really good player. He deserves his props, and he's one of my top performers from week 2, Alex McLaughlin. Really excited to see what he's able to do for the rest of this season. You guys let me know what you guys think about those top performers. If you think I missed somebody, leave me a comment down below. Please leave me a comment down below. But if not, I will catch you guys, or not even I will catch you guys. If not, I will move.
Valley's restoration, your view is our view, and what a beautiful view it is. We are proud to be locally owned, locally operated. We love our community here in Missoula and also the full 5 valleys that we do service. We give back to the community, we service our community. Our kids go to school here, we live here, we play here, and we love it here.
Okay, next thing we are going to do is we are going to preview the Big Sky matchups of week 3. First up, you got Idaho State at North Dakota. That game is at 12 p.m. on Saturday on ESPN+. Both teams are 1-1. Both teams lost to an FBS opponent. One team beat a D2 team, I think Western Oregon is D2, and one team beat a Montana squad who went to the national championship last year. North Dakota obviously is probably going to be ranked in the top 10, I would guess, after this week. They should be ranked in the top 10 after this week. Montana might not be ranked even they'll probably be still ranked top 25. I'd say they're ranked within those 15 to 25 rankings, maybe even 20 to 25. I don't know how far they slide Montana because, North Dakota's a very good team. North Dakota's a very good team, but Montana has struggled for 2 weeks. They barely beat Missouri State. I don't know what you think about Missouri State, but then North Dakota. It's still early, man. It's so hard to make some of these judgments early on in the season when you haven't had a super big sample size. But Idaho State at North Dakota, I think the one key about that game, that's one of the games that I want to be paying attention to because was it good? Like, what is this how good is this North Dakota State squad? Or how good is this I'm so sorry, North Dakota State fans, if you're watching this. How good is this North Dakota squad? How good are they? And how good is the Idaho State squad? How good are they? I want to know how good Idaho State is. I want to know how good North Dakota is. Obviously, I want to know how good Idaho State is for Big Sky play, but also I want to know how good North Dakota is because they just beat Montana, who's supposed to be one of the better teams. They're picked to win the Big Sky Conference this year. So, I think that'll give us a good barometer of how good North Dakota is. I think North Dakota should win that game. If I had to pick, I would pick North Dakota to win that game. Honestly, I picked them to win by 2 to 3 scores. But if they don't, I think that's very telling. Not only about Montana, but also about North Dakota and maybe even about Idaho State. So that's the first game. Next, you got Montana against Morehead State. Morehead State is undefeated. Currently, they have played a team called KCU, which is, I think it's like Kansas City Christian. I think it was like a Kansas Christian school. And then they played Central State. So I don't think Morehead State has played some tough competition. I don't think they've played FCS competition up to this point. But, they come into the Mecca. They come into Wild Grizz. They're looking to get a dub this year. This week. So I think it'll be interesting to see that. I think that's going to be a good game for Montana to bounce back if they want to bounce back. But also, if Montana struggles against Morehead State, I think that's a huge indictment on this Montana. Or yeah, if I thought I said Montana State for a second, but I forgot Morehead State had state in it. But if Montana struggles against Morehead State, I think that'll be a big indictment on this squad because, they're one pick to win the Big Sky. We know all the talent they have on this squad, but I don't think very highly of Morehead State. It's no offense to anybody on this Morehead State squad. I don't think very highly of them. I think Montana should roll them, and I think they need to get things back on track if they want to compete for the Big Sky Conference title. They need to get things on track if they want to compete for a national title. They're struggling at a high level defensively right now, and they need to get some things figured out. But if they can get things on track if they handle business against Morehead State. They need to handle business against Morehead State, though. So that game is played at Saturday at 1 p.m. Make sure you guys come check us out at the pregame, postgame show, the Grizzly pregame, postgame tailgate show with me, Ace Sourwine, Denny Bedard. I coming in the last segments of the show to do some of the analysis. But come check us out. Montana Morehead State, going to be a really good game this week. Next, we have Idaho versus Albany. Obviously, they played them in the quarterfinals last year, and Idaho lost to Albany. So I know Idaho will be wanting to bounce back against this Albany squad this week. Albany's 1-1. They played West Virginia. They lost by 35 actually. And then they played Long Island. They won by 6. So, I don't think very highly of this Albany squad. I don't think they're going to compete at a high level. Hopefully they prove me wrong, but I don't think they're going to compete at a high level in the CAA this year. They lost their quarterback. They lost their receiver. They lost a couple of receivers, actually. I don't know so much about what they lost defensively, but, losing a quarterback and 2 of your top receivers is always going to hurt a squad. Hopefully they had another quarterback who was able to come in now, but I know they lost their quarterback from last year, so he was a hell of a player, so that's going to be a big loss for them. That's going to be a big game for Idaho. That game is going to be played in Idaho. Idaho finally gets to play their first home game after being on the road for 2 weeks. They're in the Kibbe Dome in Moscow, Idaho. That game is going to be played at 2 p.m. on ESPN Plus on Saturday. I think Idaho should win that game, but if that'll give us more data, more information if they struggle. But maybe Albany's a really good squad. Who knows? It's football. Anybody could lose on any Saturday, but I would pick Idaho to win that game if I had to pick somebody. Next, you got South Dakota versus Portland State. Portland State is 0-2. South Dakota is 1-1. South Dakota lost by 14 to Wisconsin, which I don't think is a big loss for them. And then they beat Northern State, who I have no idea who they are, but they beat them by 40. So, South Dakota is going to get their first taste of FCS competition. And, we'll get to see what they are. Portland State is in the gauntlet of their schedule. Their whole schedule is a gauntlet. They played Washington State last week. They played Weber State, who could have been a good barometer game, but Weber State completely beat up on them. Then they got South Dakota, obviously, this week, who was a playoff team. You got Boise State, who's been running the ball at a very, very high level. Then they got Chattanooga, who was a playoff team last year, and then it goes on and on. But, Portland State is in the thick of it right now, and, they're struggling. But they got South Dakota this week. Should be a good game. I would pick South Dakota to win that game. That game is going to be played in Portland at 2 p.m. on Saturday on ESPN+. Make sure you guys go check that one out. Next, we got Abilene Christian versus Northern Colorado. Now, Northern Colorado is currently 0-2. They played Colorado State. They lost 38-17, and then they played Incarnate Word and lost by 3 touchdowns, lost by 21 to Incarnate Word. Abilene Christian plays in that United Athletic Conference. I think if there was ever a time for Northern Colorado to get a dub, at a conference dub, it's the time is now. They play in in Greeley, Colorado at 2 p.m. on Saturday on ESPN+, and I think they should win that game. I absolutely think they should win that game. But who knows? It's college football. But I think that honestly might be a really close game. 2 lower tier teams in the FCS, ACU, one of the lower UAC, United Athletic Conference teams, and then obviously Northern Colorado has finished near the bottom of the Big Sky since they've been in the Big Sky. So it'll be very interesting from that standpoint to see that Northern Colorado game. Next, we have Weber State at Lamar. After seeing what Weber State was able to do what Weber State was able to do against Portland State. I feel very strong saying that Weber State should handle Lamar. Lamar just beat Mississippi Valley State by 14, and then they lost a close one by a touchdown to Texas State in the first week. So, I mean, I don't know. This Lamar squad, they play in the Southland Conference. They're 1-1 right now. You know, defensively, they haven't played the strongest. They put up 55 points. You know, Weber State, I don't know. That's going to be a good game. This is going to be a good game. This would be a good test, actually, for Weber State. This Weber State game versus Lamar. I think this could be a good test. If Weber State rolls them, I think that gives us a lot of information about Weber State. If they don't, I also think that gives us a lot of information about Weber State and maybe some information about Lamar if anybody cares about non-conference things. But that game is going to be played. Where does Lamar play at? Beaumont, Texas. Okay. So that game is going to be played in Beaumont, Texas on Saturday at 5 p.m. on ESPN Plus. Both teams are 1-1. That could be a very interesting game. That might be one that I'm keyed into this Saturday. Next, you have Eastern Washington versus SELA, Southeast Louisiana. Southeast Louisiana is 0-2. Eastern Washington just lost a heartbreaker to Drake. In overtime. That game is going to be played in Southeast Louisiana. Where do they play at? That game is going to be played in Hammond, Louisiana on Saturday at 5 p.m. on ESPN Plus. Eastern Washington needs to bounce back. SELA obviously has played Southern Miss. They lost by 25, and then they played Tulane. They lost by 50. So they haven't had a taste of FCS competition. They will get that this week. Could be an interesting, if Eastern wants to bounce back, this is your time to bounce back. You're playing a SELA squad. I think you're better than this SELA squad. Usually Southland teams are pretty strong offensively. They usually are able to put up a lot of points against Southland competition. Not so much all the time against, out of conference competition. But, if Eastern Washington wants to bounce back, this is the week to bounce back. You got SELA, handle them, handle them. Get the defensive struggles figured out, but handle this squad. Next, you got UC Davis versus Southern Utah at 6 p.m. on Saturday, being played on ESPN Plus. That game is in Southern Utah, Cedar City, Utah, in the altitude. UC Davis should handle Southern Utah. Southern Utah plays in that UAC conference, which I don't think is a very strong conference. Southern Utah is currently 1-1 right now. They've played they beat UTEP. I forgot they got that FCS over FBS dub. So this could be a pretty good game. This could be a pretty good. I mean, how good is UTEP? They lost to Utah by 49. So, but Utah's top 15 team in the country. So I don't know. Southern Utah, they beat UTEP. I don't know how good UTEP is. UTEP is undefeated, defeated right now. They lost by 30 to Nebraska, and then now they just lost by 3 to Southern Utah. I did not watch that Southern Utah versus UTEP game, but I heard the ending of it was very, very interesting. UC Davis versus Southern Utah. This could be a pretty good game. That might be another game that I'm tapped into on Saturday to watch. 6 p.m. on ESPN Plus. Could be a pretty good game. Next, you got Western Oregon versus Cal Poly. Obviously, we just saw Idaho State beat up on Western Oregon. I think Cal Poly should do much of the same against Western Oregon. That game is at 6 p.m. in San Luis Obispo, California, on Saturday on ESPN Plus. Tap into it. Could be a pretty good game. Next, you got Northern Arizona versus Utah Tech. Northern Arizona, I think, should win that game pretty handedly. Utah Tech has not been the strongest team since they've been to the FCS. They lost this week to UNLV 72-14. They lost first week, in week 1, I should say, to Montana State 31-7. So, tap into that game if you want. I think it should probably, I don't know, because Cal Poly's not that strong. Cal Poly lost to San Diego. So very interesting from that standpoint, because I don't think San Diego is a very strong squad. Or not, what am I talking about? I'm on Cal Poly now. I'm getting mixed up. Utah Tech, though, is not one of the stronger teams in the United Athletic Conference. They've been in the FCS not that long, and they haven't been very competitive at the FCS. I don't know how many games they've won at the FCS, but it can't be a lot. They haven't been able to compete at a high level. I think Northern Arizona should probably win that game by 2 to 3 touchdowns if Northern Arizona is as good as I think they are. I mentioned all offseason that I thought Northern Arizona would be my dark horse in the Big Sky Conference. They played Arizona pretty tight, and then obviously they won against a Lincoln squad that is not great. So Northern Arizona, I'm interested to see how they're able to do against Utah Tech. Think they should win it, but who knows? It's college football. That game is at 7 p.m. on ESPN Plus in St. George, Utah. Last but not least, we got Sacramento State. I can't wait till Big Sky Play starts so that there's less games for me to go through. You know, there'll be like 6 games for me to go through instead of, freaking 12. But you got Nichols versus Sacramento State. Another Southland team playing against another Big Sky opponent. There must be kind of like a home and home type thing going on with some of these Southland teams because there's quite a few Southland teams playing Big Sky competition. A few, not quite a few, just a few. But you got Nichols versus Sacramento State at Sacramento, in Sacramento, California. I think Sac State should win that game. Sacramento State's 0-2. They've played FBS competition. Nichols is 0-2 as well. They've only played FBS competition. They played a close one against Louisiana Tech, lost 25-17. And then they played a close one against LSU. They lost that one by 20. So, I think Nichols could be a decent opponent for Sacramento State. I think it could be a pretty good game. If you guys remember a couple of years ago, I think that was Nichols. I think a couple of years ago when they still had Lindsey Scott, Nichols, was that? I can't remember if that was Nichols or if that was Incarnate Word. I think it was Incarnate Word. I don't think it was Nichols. Disregard what I was about to say. Sacramento State plays Nichols. They're both 0-2. That game is going to be at 7 p.m. on ESPN Plus. Should be a pretty good game, but like I always say, it's college football. You don't know until you know. But I think we're going to get some more answers about some of these Big Sky squads after some of these matchups. Should be some good matchups this week. The games that I am going to be paying attention to. Idaho State at North Dakota. Weber State at Lamar. That should be a really good game. UC Davis at Southern Utah. So my top 3 games for this week to pay attention to are Idaho State at North Dakota. You got Weber State at Lamar, and you got UC Davis at Southern Utah. Those are going to be some really good matchups that I think could come down to the wire, could give us a lot of information about some of these squads, but I think Southern Utah is a decent squad. I think Lamar is a decent squad, and, I think Idaho State. I just want to see that Idaho State-North Dakota game because North Dakota just beat Montana, who was picked to win the Big Sky this year. A lot of people had high hopes for Montana. Obviously, if they lose to Idaho State, I think that is very telling in all aspects. It's very telling about Idaho State, very telling about North Dakota, and very telling about Montana. People have bad days, granted, I understand that, but, that's a date I'm paid attention to. More than those, though, Weber State, Lamar, and UC Davis, Southern Utah. But I do want to see the outcome of that Idaho State, North Dakota squad. What game are you guys most interested in seeing this week? You guys let me know in the comments, and I will move on. Okay, I want to thank you guys so much for tapping into the channel. I appreciate you guys so much. Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button. Make sure you guys hit the like. Make sure you guys leave me a comment down below. It's going to be a great week of college football this week. I can't wait to talk to you guys next week after what has happened and see what we got on our schedule for next week. But please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the leave a comment. Please hit the like button, and I will catch you guys next week. See ya.